Hello, hello. It's a fifth line day. Gate 53 in the line 5 is called Assertion. I mentioned before on some occasions that the first and the fifth lines have a relationship in that the first line is the truth of the hexagram and the fifth is how society wants that hexagram to be. It's what society projects onto that hexagram that it's about. Additionally to that, that harmonic that they've got, or that resonance they've got going on, in this gate, both the first and the fifth lines are unusual in that both aspects in the exaltation have that fuzzy, mystical energy of Neptune fixing them. Now, it's not functioning at the moment in either case, either the first or the fifth line, because we don't have Neptune around in anybody we know of in this position as their sun position. Not unless there's someone around who's 150, and that's possible. There are parts of the world where people have incredible longevity, and so maybe they carry this vibration. But for the most of the population, the exaltation is not part of our experience right now. And this might not seem important, but it does have significance because gate 53 is a format energy. It is the format energy of our evolutionary process. So both in terms of its foundation and how it's perceived, beginnings are not well understood. It's a thing where, from a mystical point of view, and it is saying, because Neptune also has a mystical side, it's saying that beginnings are deeply mystical, they're deeply magical, but they're not seen correctly. It's all very fuzzy when Neptune is involved. This cyclical process is very magical because we are constantly moving, and it's something that, generally speaking, we don't think about. It's just not in our sort of psyche to consider how fast we're moving, both as a rotation on the planet and through space. So there's that both movements there. We are not static. If we didn't move, then we would be static, and stasis is not, it doesn't live. It's stasis is a kind of almost a dead state. So we move in space. And movement is a difference in a way. If you have been in human design for a while, and it's maybe 20 years, so we're talking quite a while, then you might look back over the cycles that you've been through in your life and discover that the same things come up again and again. But each time you go through them, they're slightly different because you are in a different place. And you could be living in the same house, but in terms of the wider scheme of things, the cosmos, you are in a different place. You're not in the same space in space. So the cycle in that sense is different. So we'll look at the exaltation, even though there isn't anybody on the planet who has it. The exaltation says the underlying and often psychic recognition of the intrinsic values of development that even in periods of isolation has the assertiveness to maintain direction. Its very power garners continued support, even from those who are basically opposed. The pressure to recognize the value of development and the energy for beginnings, regardless of circumstance. So the fifth line is known as the general, and this is a great description for the general. And when you think of the genetic continuity, then you can sort of apply this across the board to the fifth lines. So although we don't have anybody with this particular exaltation, the themes that are in it apply to fifth lines all over. So if you need to get something started, well, there are loads of good starters in the world, but it's the general that you seek out because you project onto the general that they have this quality. They can really get things going and they can really get other people to join in. Mystically, the second line is always called, but the fifth line does the calling. Okay, the second line is the hermit, the fifth line is the heretic. There's harmony between the two. It's the importance of the fifth line Ra said, that we remember that they are useless other than in times of crisis, when they can bring forward their practical solutions when they're called to do so. Of course, they're not useless to everyone when they're not out saving the world. You know, the people in their day-to-day life like to have them around, but not in their savior role, which is lucky, because this line of universalization, it really doesn't work well on friends or on family. It needs the stranger to call the heretic out. In the detriment, we have an over-assertiveness that, rather than applied to maintaining support in the face of opposition and isolation, may actually strengthen the opposing forces by its attitude, where the energy for beginnings attracts the very forces that can abort them. Now, it doesn't say will abort them, it says can abort them. And this is the force that we live in, because Neptune isn't here. It's not part of our experience for this exaltation. So we only have the detriment. And that makes this time that we're living in now a sort of survival of the fittest kind of environment. You stand up and you say, I think it is this. I don't know why you have to make a fist, but I think it is this. And somebody immediately opposes that. They stand up and they say, no, it is not, it is this. And this is sort of what we live with today. This is the energy that we have in our world, and what we've had for quite a long time now, as the way in which development has been projected on. And think about what that's done to our civilization in this era. The 5 is of a great seducer. This is one of its keynotes. It's one of their great gifts. And they have to be able to seduce both sides. You know, it's like the politician that can get a little bit from the right and a little bit from the left in order to get their legislation across. They have to be able to seduce both sides for that to work. But of course, in going towards and in trying to evolve a new beginning, those forces that maybe by their very nature opposed to each other have to be brought slightly into harmony by their saying, taking a little bit from there and a little bit from there. There's a much greater challenge there, and they may not succeed. And if they don't succeed, then their reputation goes down the toilet. The whole thing about being a 5th line is that if you cannot live up to the projection, then where you are punished is in your reputation. In other words, the positive projection becomes a negative projection. You know, you get a reputation then for bluffing, for faking. And it doesn't matter if that's true or not. It's not about truth, it's a projection. So the earth in the detriment is what is grounding us now. You know, it is the way that we're supposed to be now, because it's what's happening. In the global cycle course, we get a flavor of the longer term trends that are there for us. And we can see that this is a time of great genetic diversity. We have mixed the genetic pools across the planet in this time that we've been living in. We've created a huge gene pool for the mutation to emerge from. This is all part of the mechanic. It's kind of, you could say it's part of the great plan. Not that there is anybody planning it, it's just the way the program is unfolding, but it's been very necessary. We also have an intellectual diversity that we've never had on this scale before. It is not fixed on one way, but it's constantly breaking and jumping in and out. And this is part of the consciousness of the total field right now, because this is a format energy. And format energies are so important. You know, the way that we experience abstract people today is not the way that they really are. Abstract people get a very bad press in this time that we live in, because the fact of the matter is that these 2 Neptune aspects in the 1st and the 5th lines are veiled. They are not there. And so we have an imbalance. The channel of 4253, a design of balanced development, is not. We are in an imbalanced time. We're off kilter. We are out of balance on purpose, because it's the plan, it's the mechanic, it's the program that we live in. This is the time that we are meant to be out of balance. As we move into the next Neptune cycle that affects this program that's running, we'll come back into balance. And those people who work with human design in the next century, they will have a different foundation to look at. They will have a totally different way of looking at the nature of the abstract experience, because things will be back in balance again. There'll be a balanced foundation, and there will be a balanced way in which it is projected upon from the outside. Format energies have enormous influence. It's something that often isn't gone into too deeply in things like a foundation reading or in an LYD. And yet, if you've got a foundation gate, any one of the 6 gates involved in the foundation channels, they completely rule the chart. It's okay, so you could have somebody who is totally individual in their design, and yet they have the 53rd gate. So this gate is going to rule them because it's format energy, and it will insist on that format being followed. So instead of this individual pulsing along the way that they are supposed to, this is an individual who works in cycles. So imagine then that, okay, so you are an individual, but then you're not individual, and then you're very individual, and then you're not individual, and you have the cycle that goes around. And it's a bit like the pulse, but it has a different energy to it. So it's not following the normal format of an individual. Formats have enormous power. So here in this format, this is our evolutionary way. We are in an experiential way that is out of balance right now. And it's not that it's good or it's bad, it's just the mechanic that's speaking. We're just on one side of it. If individuals have the logic format, they get very fixed in their habits. They get fixed on repeating something as an individual. Often it could be very artistic, because that feeds into the channel of talent, and it's all about repeating patterns and mastery and the enthusiasm of skills and so on. The individual expression then is loaded with the capacity to repeat and focus. And so maybe composers, painters, dancers, a lot of creativity comes out of that, because it brings the discipline through that format of the 952 to focus and to concentrate and to stay with an individual process. The format dictates the way in which the frequency will work. It will not block the individuality, but it brings its own flavor to it. And of course, it doesn't just work with individuality. If you're very tribal, but you've got one of the format channels or a format gate. Oh, my bread is ready to have its process. My bread's in a cycle. I'll go and look at it in a minute. Yes, any of the circuits work in the same way. So the grounding comes through the earth in gate 54, line 5, which is called magnanimity. Given that we only have the detriment of the 53.5 just now, which tends to an over-assertiveness and a strengthening of opposing forces, a bit of magnanimity, it's another one of those words, isn't it? Well, anyway, whatever it is, it might come in handy as a kind of a grounding agent. There's a bit of generosity, a bit of fairness, maybe some high-mindedness. It's a nice balance here. It could go a long way to helping. Mercury going into gate 7 at 2308, and this is the army, the role of the self in interaction. It looks towards the future, and it's to do with the direction that humanity is taking. It's very influential, and very often it is the influencer of authority. It's the power behind the throne rather than being the power themselves. And it's a logical gate, and it sits in the G center. The moon is still in gate 40, and it moves into gate 64 at 1326. This is called before completion. It's the gate of confusion. It is the abstract mental pressure trying to make sense of the memories of experiences of the past. So this is a head center gate. There's a constant pressure in this gate or to make sense of experience. And it comes without an apparent order. It's like pictures that are on a movie reel. They're all mixed up in the wrong, that, you know, so you're not getting a coherent story. It can be very confusing, but it's also a natural part of the process. It's a process which needs time to chunter along. You know, it's part of the circuit that moves through the emotional system, and there's no truth in the now, and the wave takes time. So it's a thing that needs to have some space around it, but it can lead to a bit of anxiety. And you know, it's a mental, all the mental gates, they have that potential for anxiety or depression. Ra said that those three mental channels up there, the head and ajna channels, they are very similar to the physical format channels in that they are mental format channels. So confusion and then the realization that comes from confusion is as much a conditioning field for anybody who's got those gates as the format channels down at the bottom. So that's another angle to it. And it's something you experience. What is it in your experience? Experiment with it. That's what I wanted to say. Experiment. How does that feel for you? Does it feel like it's a kind of a thing that is a constant for you, that it brings its flavor to everything if you've got it, or if you notice when it comes in the transit, does suddenly everything start to feel a bit confusing? Of course, we move into gate 47. This is one of those transits where you've got the one end of the channel immediately followed by the other end of the channel, which doesn't happen all that often. And it happens here. So the 64 leads into the 47 at 1:45 tomorrow morning. And this is that filtering process, the ajna gate of realization, where it's sorting through those mental images from gate 64, making sense of the past. And again, it's a patience game, because it needs that time for it to happen. It's not an instant quick fist. It certainly isn't a quick fist. There was a whole image I wasn't expecting. This is a quick fix, even. It takes time for clarity to emerge. And yeah. Oh, and it's not a gate for you to make sense of your own confusion. This is an outer authority. It's a gate for helping others with their realizations, potentially helping them to resolve their life issues. And now I have to go and fold my bread. I am making what am I making? I'm making a spelt sourdough with hemp seed. That's today's project. So I will go and do that, and I will leave you and be back tomorrow with the 6th line, the last line of this gate 53. So until then, have a good one and go gently.